It was an ordinary afternoon in Washington, D.C. when President Donald Trump received an unexpected package. The box was plain and wrapped in brown paper, but what stood out was the handwritten label in red marker, "Help Us." There was no return address. Secret Service swept the package thoroughly. It wasn't dangerous, at least not physically curious, but cautious. Trump brought it into the Oval Office. He placed it gently on the resolute desk, staring at the words his staff watched anxiously. "Mr. President, do you want us to open it?" An aide asked. He shook his head. "No," he replied. "I'll do it myself." With a slight tremble, Trump slowly began to unwrap the box. The room fell silent. No one knew what to expect. Hate mail, a protest item, maybe even some strange prank. But deep inside, Trump felt something different. This wasn't an attack. It felt like a cry. As the last layer of paper came off the old wooden box underneath, was revealed carved roughly by hand. It bore the initials M.Il. and a small American flag drawn in crayon on the side. He opened the lid, and inside, neatly folded, was a stack of letters tied with twine. On top of the stack sat a single photograph, a young boy in a tattered hoodie standing in front of a burned-down house, holding a sign that read, "Please don't forget us." The room went still. One of Trump's senior advisors muttered, "Sir, this doesn't look like politics. This looks personal." Trump took a seat, gently lifting the photograph from the box. The boy's eyes haunted him, full of fear, but also stubborn hope. Carefully, he untied the string and pulled the first letter from the bundle. It was written in a child's handwriting. "Shaky but sincere, dear whoever opens this, my name is Luke. I am 9 years old. My sister's name is Mia. She's 6. We used to live in Paradise, California. Then the fire came. Everything burned. We had to run. Mommy and Daddy tried to save Grandpa, but he couldn't move fast. He died. Now we live in our car. We don't go to school anymore. Mommy cries at night. I try to be brave for Mia. Please help us. Please don't forget us. Love, Luke." By the time Trump finished reading, his voice had softened, and his hand trembled slightly. Everyone in the room stood frozen. He looked around and said, "Do we know if this is real?" His communications director replied, "We'll verify, sir." "But it feels real." Trump held the photo again. "Get me information on recent fire victims in Paradise now." His tone was firm, but his expression had shifted. There was no bravado. No deflection, just a man confronted with pain he couldn't ignore. Outside, the press clamored for updates on a new policy. Inside, the president had just met a child through ink and paper. And something inside him stirred within hours. The White House had tracked down records and reports from Paradise, California. The town had been nearly wiped out in a wildfire months earlier. Hundreds of homes lost dozens of lives. Taken families scattered. And yes, Luke Miller and his sister Mia were real. A local church had listed them as temporarily housed in a 2003 Honda Civic, parked behind a closed gas station. Their mother, Hannah Miller, once a nurse, was now jobless and battling depression. Trump read the report silently. "What do we do, sir?" An aide asked. Trump stood. "I want to go there," unannounced. No press. Just me, a few agents, and someone who can translate government paperwork into human words. "I want to meet this boy." His staff hesitated, "But sir, the optics." "I don't care about optics." Trump said, "That boy asked for help. He deserves an answer." That night, under cover of darkness, Air Force One quietly lifted off. It wasn't a campaign trip. It wasn't a rally. It was a mission born from a child's plea, 3 words on a box. "Help us back in Paradise." The wind carried the scent of ash and loss. But in a small car behind a shuttered gas station, Luke held his sister close and whispered, "I think someone heard us." The morning air was crisp as a black SUV pulled into the quiet remnants of Paradise. The few locals who noticed it couldn't have guessed that inside sat the President of the United States, dressed in a simple jacket and cap. Trump stepped out and scanned the scene. The gas station was deserted except for the worn-out Civic tucked behind it. His Secret Service detail gave him the nod. It matched the description. Trump walked toward it slowly inside. Hannah was asleep in the front seat, her arm draped protectively over her children. Luke opened his eyes first. He blinked at the sight of the man approaching. He nudged Mia. "Wake up, there's a man in a suit." Trump stopped a few feet away and took off his cap. "Are you Luke?" he asked softly. Luke didn't speak. He only nodded. Trump crouched down. "I got your letter at that." Hannah stirred awake, confused, then alarmed. She sat upright. "What's happening?" "It's okay, Mom," a Secret Service agent said gently. "We're here to talk." Trump introduced himself. Simply, "I came to hear your story from you. Not from reports." Tears welled in Hannah's eyes for the first time in a long time. Someone powerful hadn't walked past them. They'd stopped listening to spark of dignity return to her voice. "Then let me tell you," she said. "Not just for me, for all of us." Inside the Civic, Hannah shared more than her own story. She spoke for hundreds. "We were never poor." She began, "My husband was a carpenter. I was a nurse when the fires hit. We didn't have time to grab anything, just the kids and Grandpa. He didn't make it. We've been living in this car ever since, and we're not alone." Trump listened quietly, asking questions only to understand, not to interrupt. Mia clutched a stuffed rabbit with half its fur melted away. "That was the only toy we could save," Luke whispered. Hannah continued, "I wrote letters, called agencies, visited relief centers, but we're just one family, and I know others worse off people who didn't have the strength to write letters. That's why Luke and Mia packed that box with letters from other families." He called it a hope box. He said maybe it could find someone who could actually do something. Trump turned to Luke. "You collected the letters." Luke nodded. "Some at church. Some from people living in tents. They gave them to me because I still believe in good people." Trump looked down, swallowing emotion. These weren't policy problems. These were human ones. And somehow a 9-year-old boy had become the voice for them all. Trump stood, brushing dust from his knees. "I want to read every letter in that box. Then I want to make sure no more get written out of desperation." It was the beginning of something more than politics back in D.C. Trump gathered a small, trusted team. No cameras, no speechwriters, just real stories and real people. He placed the box of letters on the table in the Situation Room. Not for national security, but for national dignity. Each letter told a different version of the same story. Fire loss, eviction, medical bankruptcy, joblessness, and forgotten promises. One from a high school teacher now living in a tent. Another from a war veteran struggling with PTSD and no health care. "This isn't just about fire recovery," Trump told his staff. "It's about forgotten Americans." An aide said gently, "Sir, if you want to help, we need more than sympathy, we need action." Trump nodded. "Then we take action. We create the HOPE Initiative, housing, employment, trauma care, and fast-track support for displaced families, starting with Paradise." "But Sir Congress," someone started. Trump raised a hand. "We don't need permission to be decent. I'll fund the first stage with my own salary and challenge every billionaire in this country to match me. Let's stop proving points and start proving people matter." Word began to spread. Not from a press conference, but from whispers among those who were helped. First, Trump didn't just open a box. He opened a door. A quiet revolution began. Trump reached out personally to leaders in tech, sports, and entertainment. "Match me," he said, "not in power. In purpose." Some were skeptical. Others inspired. Elon Musk pledged solar panels for rebuilt homes. Dwayne Johnson funded a mobile therapy unit. Oprah donated to school programs for displaced children. Temporary homes, converted trailers, tiny houses, unused federal shelters started popping up in Paradise. Some had bunk beds, others kitchens, but all had locks, warmth, and dignity. Luke and Mia were among the first to move in. Luke wandered into their new place with wide eyes. "We have a sink," he shouted, and a bed. Hannah hugged her children and cried for once. Not out of fear, but relief at a press meeting. Trump was asked, "Why are you doing this?" He paused. "Because a 9-year-old reminded me what leadership is really about. And if we need 1,000 Lukes to wake us up, then let's listen to every one of them." And just like that, the Hope Box became a movement. Late one night, Trump sat alone in the Oval Office with the final letter from the box. This one was from an 82-year-old woman named Martha Jean Carter. "Dear reader, I don't expect help. I've lived long. I lost my husband in Korea. My son died in the wildfire. My legs don't work much. But I still stitch quilts. I give them to others sleeping on the street. My heart hurts more than my body if you can't help me. That's okay, but please help the children." They didn't ask for any of this. "With love, Martha Jean." Trump put the letter down, blinking hard for once. He didn't have a quick answer, just silence and determination. He picked up the phone. "Find Martha Jean," he said. "I want to visit her personally." Martha Jean's house, What was left of it stood in the outskirts of a forgotten neighborhood. A simple wheelchair ramp led up to a patched-together porch. She didn't expect a knock that morning, much less from Donald Trump. He brought her flowers and one of Luke's quilts, a full circle of giving. "You're the first president to visit me," she said, wheeling forward with a warm smile. Trump sat beside her, not as a politician but as a guest. "Your letter," he said. "It shook me. You've lost so much and still." "You give, I don't have money," she said. "But I have stitches and stories and love." Trump nodded. "That's more than most billionaires I know." They talked for an hour about war loss and the power of kindness. As he left, she whispered, "Thank you for listening." He replied, "Thank you for teaching me." Inspired by Martha Jean, the White House launched the National Quilt Project, a symbolic act of unity. Survivors, children, seniors, veterans, each stitched a piece of fabric. Representing their story, the quilt was displayed in the Capitol Rotunda for all to see. Luke's patch said, "Still hopeful." Mia's safe now. Hannah's, "I can breathe again." Martha's, "Love never burns millions." Visited social media lit up. The message was clear. These were not forgotten people. These were America's fabric stitched together in pain, hope, and healing. Even Trump, a man known for his walls, found meaning in something softer, a quilt of stories that brought a nation closer. For weeks, Trump had refused media coverage. "This isn't for ratings," he told his team. But as the Hope Initiative grew, survivors themselves began sharing videos, testimonials, and live footage of their new homes and reunited families. Eventually, Trump agreed to a single televised event, a town hall held not in a studio but inside a converted warehouse shelter in Paradise. He sat in a circle with families, no suite, just a windbreaker beside him. Luke held the now empty Hope box, which had become a symbol across the country. A reporter asked, "Mr. President, what did you see when you opened that box?" Trump glanced at Luke, then answered, "I saw America, not its politics, its heart, and it broke mine." The room went silent, then erupted in applause, not for Trump but for the people around him who refused to give up. Not everyone cheered. Critics accused Trump of using the moment to boost his image. Others claimed the initiative was unsustainable, that it undermined federal protocols. In a press conference, Trump responded plainly, "I think kids sleep inside four walls is controversial. Then I'll gladly take the heat. This isn't about my legacy, it's about their lives." Still, lawsuits emerged. Cities worried about federal overreach. Budget hawks attacked the funding, but public support drowned out most objections. People weren't just donating, they were volunteering. Doctors offered free care. Retired teachers returned to makeshift classrooms. Formerly homeless veterans became mentors. The Hope Box was no longer a one-time gesture. It was now a call to action, one louder than politics. Weeks after the national quilt was unveiled, Martha Jean's niece visited the White House with a surprise, a hand-stitched quilt made by fire survivors and displaced families. This one just for Trump. Each square carried a thank you. Some had names, others had drawings from kids, stick figures of smiling faces and sunshine at the center. Martha Jean's message was stitched in gold thread. You listened, that was enough, but you acted. And that was everything. Trump held the quilt in his hands, visibly moved. He later placed it in the Oval Office, not as decoration, but as a reminder of why he fought. Even when it got hard, Luke was invited to speak at a school fundraiser for displaced students. Shy but brave. He stood on stage with his hands trembling. "I'm just a kid," he began. "But when I saw people hurting, I thought, what if someone could help? So I packed a box, not with toys, with stories." He pointed to the back of the room where Trump stood quietly. He opened that box. He didn't throw it away. He didn't laugh. He helped the audience rose to their feet. Teachers cried. Parents hugged their children. The world saw a 9-year-old boy not as a victim, but as a catalyst while archiving the remaining letters from the Hope Box. A volunteer discovered one that had slipped beneath the lining. It was written in crayon, barely legible. "Dear whoever we sleep in our van. It leaks when it rains. Mommy cries at night. I don't want to grow up if this is life. Please don't forget us. Love, Avery, age 7. And Trump saw the letter and went silent. He asked, "Have we found her?" They hadn't. A new search began. Not just for Avery, but for every child still living in shadows. He sent a message to the public. Until every child like Avery has a bed, We're not done. 3 days later, a shelter volunteer recognized the handwriting. Avery and her mother Elena had been too afraid to register for aid, but they'd followed the story when they heard about the lost letter. They cried. The reunion was quiet. Trump personally greeted them as they stepped into a temporary housing unit. Avery ran up to him, held his hand, and said softly, "You read my letter?" "I did," Trump replied, "and I'll never forget it." She hugged him without hesitation. Elena broke down. "I thought no one would care." Trump looked her in the eye and said, "You were never invisible, just unheard." Luke approached Trump with a new idea. "What if we make another box? One people can write thank you letters in for the helpers." And so a new hope box was launched, this time for teachers, firefighters, therapists, volunteers, donors, and unsung heroes. Letters poured in. One thanked a janitor who gave his paycheck to a family. Another honored a high school girl who built solar lights from scrap. Hope was no longer about needing help. It was about giving it. A movement born from desperation had transformed into a national culture of compassion. In the White House, a room was quietly converted into the legacy room, not for past presidents, but for stories from the Hope Box. The walls were lined with letters, quilts, photos, names, faces. A plaque read, "Here lies proof that one box can change a nation, and that compassion once unlocked spreads faster than fire." Visitors wept in silence. Children asked questions. Leaders paused, humbled. It wasn't a museum, it was a mirror. Martha Jean passed away peacefully in her sleep, but not before stitching one final quilt. It arrived at the White House days after her funeral. At the center was a single line stitched in red. "I believed in America even when it forgot me." Trump had it framed and placed beneath her original letter. He later told the press, "I thought I was opening a box. But the truth is, the box opened me." 1 year later, paradise was no longer just rebuilding, it was thriving. Families returned, schools reopened. The scent of ash was replaced by hope. Trump visited quietly. No fanfare, just to check in. He stopped by Hannah's new home. Luke ran outside with a fresh letter in hand. "Mr. President, it's not a help letter this time." He grinned. "It's a thank you." Trump took it, smiled, and placed it in his coat pocket. Before he left, he looked around at the rebuilt neighborhood. "No cameras," he said, "but this is the picture I'll keep in my heart forever." And somewhere under the stars, a stitched quilt swayed in the breeze, proof that even in ashes, hope can rise.